Hello everyone. This is the BSE-Sofia earnings call for the fourth quarter of 2016. My name is Ivo Stankov and I shall briefly present to you a short market overview and the report of the exchange for the fourth quarter of 2016. And afterwards, Ivan Takev, the CEO of the exchange, shall present to you the progress of our ongoing projects and our plans for the future. I want to remind you that we put a number on each slide. Feel free to ask questions during the presentation, mentioning the slide number they refer to. In the end, we shall address your questions and we shall answer each question. You may ask the questions through the chat form. When you press the chat button, there is a second option, questions and answers, and there you can ask your questions. And now moving on to the presentation. The fourth quarter was a period of overall growth for the markets organized by BSE-Sofia. Compared to the numbers at the end of the third quarter, the market capitalization grew by 12.5%, turnover grew by the staggering 143%, and all the indices increased their value. This led to higher trading fees and increased revenue for the stock exchange. The active trade of the expat Bulgaria Sofix UCIT ETF, investing in companies underlying the leading Sofix index, which was listed in the third quarter, attracted even more interest to the market. The market capitalization of BSE-Sofia reached 9.68 billion BGN at the end of the reported quarter, compared to the 8.61 billion BGN at the end of the third quarter. The market capitalization of all markets and segments increased. The largest increase was on the premium equity segment by 22%, followed by a 12.7% growth of the standard equity segment capitalization, and an increase in the capitalization of the equity segments on the alternative market by 9.72%. The values of all indices of BSE-Sofia increased, as I already mentioned. The movement of the values of all indices was unidirectional and their curves have similar shapes. Only the BG rate values chart differs due to the type of companies comprising the index. The biggest percentage increase was in the value of Sofix, which grew by over 16%, followed by BGBX40 increasing also by almost 16%. BGTR30 grew by 13%, while BG rate had an almost 5% increase. The turnover on the regulated market of financial instruments in the fourth quarter grew by 143%, as we already mentioned, reaching 194 million BGN. For comparison, in the third quarter, it amounted to 80 million BGN. The increase is due to the soaring equity turnover, which increased by 106%, growth in rates turnover by 78%, and bonds turnover increased by the staggering 808%. The turnover in the other financial instruments group also grew, but in absolute figures, it was not so significant. The overall number of issues listed on the markets organized by BSE-Sofia decreased by 6 in the fourth quarter, but as you can see from the chart, the numbers remain stable and there is almost no change in the number of issues. With regard to the sales revenue of the stock exchange, there was an increase of nearly 9% where compared to the corresponding period of 2015, mainly due to an increase in trading fees by 13% due to higher market turnover, and information services fees by 44%, which grew due to the increase in market data sales. Finance revenue decreased from 231,000 to 222,000 BGN as a result of a decrease of interest revenue from deposits and current accounts with banks and interest revenue from investments held to maturity. Revenue from the sales of real estate, which is included under other operating revenue, reflects the sale of the fourth floor of the BSE-Sofia building and 3 parking spots to Central Depository carried out in the third quarter of 2016. The other revenue items declined, but the decrease was insignificant in absolute value. The comparison between the structure of revenue in 2015 and 2016 shows that the share of each item remains relatively stable over time, keeping in mind the notes on revenue which we made in the previous slide. Moving on to cost, The main cost items increased by 1.26% where compared to the end of 2015. Hired services expenses grew due to a rise in consulting and other services by 33,000 BGN or 12.5%, and an increase in taxes and charges by 23,000 BGN or 153%. Personnel costs shrunk by 41,000 BGN or 4%. The change in the other cost items is also insignificant. The comparison between the structure of costs in 2015 and 2016 also shows a stable structure, and the share of each item remains relatively stable over time. The net financial result of the stock exchange. The total operating revenue for the period ending December 31st, 2016 grew by 423,000 BGN or 22%. The cost increased by 29,000 BGN or 1.31%. At the end of the fourth quarter of 2016, the net financial result of BSE-Sofia is positive to the amount of 64,000 BGN, which is mainly due to the higher operations revenues as a result of the increased turnover and the one-off increase in other operating income. The cost grew due to increased higher services, partly compensated by lower personnel cost. As at December 31st, 2016, the net result of BSE-Sofia is a profit of 0.009 BGN per share. Moving on to assets and liabilities. The total assets of Bulgarian Stock Exchange Sofia at the end of the fourth quarter of 2016 were 157,000 BGN or 1.5% higher than the value at the end of 2015. The significant change in property, plant and equipment item is due to the aforementioned sale of a real estate. As of December 31st, the company has no term deposits with banks, while cash and cash equivalents grow significantly. Other non-current receivables decreases by 328,000 BGN and reflects only the long-term part of the receivables on a session contract on a deposit with a bank placed under special supervision. Other receivables and prepaid expenses, which reflects the short-term part of the said receivable, grows accordingly. The installments and the interest thereon, due at the end of 2015, June the 30th, 2016, and the end of 2016 are still not paid. There were no other major changes in the company's assets. Regarding liabilities, the retained earnings losses at the end of 2015 amounting to BGN 333,000 loss was covered by means of reserve, which decreased accordingly. The decision was adopted at the general meeting of shareholders of BSE-Sofia in 2016. The retained earnings item as at the end of the fourth quarter of 2016 amounts to BGN 38,000 and is mainly due to the increase in operational income from the current period, while also reflecting the revenue from the aforementioned sale of a real estate. Current liabilities grew by 5.5% due to an increase in tax payables by over 48% and payables to personnel and social security by 12%. The shareholder structure of the BSE-Sofia remains stable over time. The majority shareholder is the Ministry of Finance, owning a share of a little over 50%. The number of shares held by other shareholder groups is almost unchanged compared to the previous quarter. The number of shares held by foreign shareholders decreases slightly in the fourth quarter, but in the previous quarters we saw a minor increase in the number of shares owned by foreign investors. The trade in BSE-Sofia own shares was active compared to the previous quarters, and the market capitalization increased from 15.5 million BGN to 18.9 million BGN. The average price for the quarter was 2.556 BGN per share. The price at the end of the quarter increased by 0.51 BGN per share, or 21.6%. The minimum price per share was 2.112 BGN, and the maximum price per share was 2.949 BGN per share. A total of 226,000 shares were transferred in 246 trades. The total turnover was 577,000 BGN. The shares of the exchange were traded in 53 out of a total of 46 sessions during the fourth quarter. To give you some perspective on the numbers I just quoted, in the fourth quarter compared to the previous one, the increase in turnover in BSE-Sofia's own shares was 87%, the increase in volume amounted to 68%, and the increase in the number of trades was 43%. And this is a quick summary of the data I just quoted regarding the trade in BSE-Sofia's own shares, comparing the third and the fourth quarter of 2016. I shall now let Ivan present to you the development of our ongoing projects and our future plans. Ivan?
Thank you, Ivo. Hello, everyone. Over the course of the next few minutes, I'll try to briefly update you on what we've been working for the past quarter and the progress we made. There's definitely some progress with the projects in question. The first one is the so-called BSE International Market. Well, actually, before I start with this one, just let me share with you that for in-depth explanation of each of the projects, you may refer to the previous presentations and webcasts that we did. All of them are explained in great detail. This is just an update of what we've been up to for the past 3 months. With regards to the BSE International project, it was announced 6 months ago, probably, but recently gained attention because of the progress announcements that we made. There's definitely we are moving towards its towards finalizing at least the first phase of the project. We completely intentionally opted for a phased-in project. Phase 1 will be the amendments to the rules of the regulated market that we currently operate. That regulated market will accommodate the EU compliant instruments, such are all instruments that have a European prospectus. Unfortunately, it turns out that since most of the European blue chips were listed on their domestic exchanges before 2003, they don't have a valid EU prospectus unless they have subsequently raised capital. In that case, they have a prospectus. But without such prospectus, we won't be able to issue a European passport and list it on our market as well. So this regulated market most likely will accommodate just a minor part of the total number of instruments that we have in mind. The second phase will be the MTF that will host all other instruments, both European with no valid EU prospectus and instruments that are domiciled in countries other than the European Union member countries. The good news is that the regulated market rule book will be voted by the board tomorrow and subsequently will be filed for approval with the regulator. In terms of the rule book of the multilateral trading facility, after a series of internal meetings, we've reached a consensus how exactly it will look like. And after a few more, I would say, technical details to be resolved, we will be ready to adopt that rule book as well and file it for approval. As I tried to briefly explain, the European passport will be requested from the regulators in each of the countries where those instruments are domiciled, and as long as there is such a European prospectus. But one of our obligations is to provide a translation into Bulgarian of the prospectus resume. So we'll do that simultaneously with requesting the passport. And as the day we go live, those resumes will be available on our website. 2 weeks ago, we had a conference call with our colleagues from Clearstream Banking Luxembourg, where the settlement will take place. and it seems that there are no open issues with them. From their point of view, the things look pretty straightforward, and no changes or no unpleasant situations with regards to the settlement that are expected to occur. That settlement link with Clearstream will have to be approved by the regulator. So we are ready to ask for our approval as a result of tomorrow's board meeting, together with the changes of our regulated market. But that settlement link will become effective not before we obtain an approval of our rules. As we don't want to create unaligned expectations, it must be said that the instrument list will not be fixed from day one, but instead we will include the instruments one by one, or one group after another. It's mostly due to the fact that it will require some time and efforts and resources to translate the resumes, and not all of them will be available simultaneously. Next slide, please. The second project is the efforts that we are making with regards to facilitating SME capital raising. It should be noted that the prospectus regulation that we were pretty much dependent was approved in January 2017. So what we now look forward to is the official announcement by the European Union and publishing that piece of regulation in the official Gazette of the European Union. Unfortunately, this regulation opted for a non-unified approach across the EU member state, which means that pretty much as the prospectus directive that is going to be repealed by the regulation, the member countries will be free to set their own thresholds under which no prospectus will be required. Of course, the maximum threshold has been raised to 10 million euro. Currently it is 5, but the minimum remains at 500,000. Bulgaria, our expectations are that Bulgaria most likely will opt for the lowest possible figure, that is 500,000 euro in terms of total consideration per year. This is slightly less than 1 million lever, and we will pretty much bound to it. Under such terms, that means that an SME private market could be organized. Private market means that the company will be free to offer securities to the public without first publishing the prospectus. Such a private market could be organized if the offer is addressed to 150 people per member state. That's the slight difference this time. The offer is per member state, not altogether. And the total consideration should be not more than 500,000 euro. This makes certain sense for us, although our expectations are that one threshold for all EU member countries will be set, and it will be a bit higher than this one. But nevertheless, it makes some sense for companies to raise 1 million euro without further costs for prospectuses. Of course, advisors should be hired. That's the slight difference with the regulated market. But still, it will be much more plausible than what currently our regulations provide, which is raising capital where the total consideration is not more than 100,000 euro, which is next to nothing with regard when it comes to financing. We are looking at the requirements, the other exchanges have imposed towards their authorized advisors. You know, every company that wants to raise a capital and remain a private company, the other markets require that that company should hire an authorized advisor that will support the company throughout its entire life cycle. We are researching the best practices of other markets, and we'll come up soon with a list of the requirements that we will impose on our members. The prospectus regulation also finalizes the regulatory framework of the so-called SME growth markets. Under that regulation, it is possible to set up a certain market for SMEs. It should be noted that the SME definition has changed quite significantly, and now it's under that definition is I think just one or two companies do not fall, Bulgarian companies do not fall under the definition of SMEs. So it should be properly assessed the necessity to set up a SME growth market, and the trade-off between having more companies on the SME growth market and having more companies on the regulated market that we currently operate should be properly weighed. Next slide, please. A few words about CE Link. You might have noted that Belgrade and Ljubljana Stock Exchange finalized their technical connections in December 2016, and now are visible in the CE Link platform in terms of market data. However, no brokers have entered interbroker agreements with any other existing CE Link network brokers. Currently, we have 5 connected exchanges to the platform. 3 were approved as members. These are Athens, Montenegro, and Banja Luka, but are not technically connected to it. In the meantime, one applied is expected to apply soon. Technically, if this all materializes, every single exchange on the Balkan Peninsula will be part of the network sooner or later, except for Istanbul, of course. Yeah, on January 16th, we rebalanced the indices of CE Link and included 6 companies, 4 from Ljubljana and 2 for Belgrade in the indices that we calculate. We also agreed a news partnership with CE News. It is in test mode, but all of the terms we have been agreed. So once the partnership agreement is signed by both parties, that news service will go live. We don't have any fixed compatible brokers yet, although many brokers from many countries are working on it, but they are progressing slower than we expected. A CE Link promotion event will be organized in March, but the details are not yet completely clear. Once we do that, we will announce that and coordinate this with our members. And last but not least, in the meantime, EBRD, which we've been working with for the CE Link project, launched another project which aims at post-trading integration. That project will go together with each of the individual markets' own efforts to provide a cost-effective solution for their members for cross-border settlement. And we are also discussing the potential involvement of one of the regional banks in the project. They could provide services as a custodian, but the details have not been cleared out completely, so we are not ready to announce what will follow on with this. And the next slide, please. The other focus areas, you know that the capital markets the Capital Markets Development Council was established in Q3 of 2016. it adopted a strategy, that roadmap that you see on your screens, and it provides for 14 measures that ultimately aim at delivering more liquidity to the market. Out of those 14 measures, 6 were adopted and 1 was put on hold because it was not compatible with one of the EU programs that it was relying on. So it will be changed accordingly at one of the future meetings of the committee. But we are progressing quite well with the rest of the measures, and as I said, 6 have been approved. Of course, to a certain extent, the political instability of the country puts certain measures on hold as they require certain regulatory changes to be passed, and as long as we don't have a working parliament, we can't rely on its support on that. The roadshow that was supposed to take place in September was postponed for 2010-17, and that roadshow will be held together with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in London, and it will be on May 80th. We will go there with select listed companies from Bulgaria, and as I said, it will be organized together with TBRD. All of our members will be invited to that event as well. One of the key projects that we've also been working on is the domestic treasuries market that we started some time ago last year in 2016. Here we also have some progress. There was a joint meeting with the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank and the Financial Supervision Commission last week, and it seems to me that we cleared out all the technical details that were more or less remaining as an open issues until that moment. So from technical perspective, everything seems to be quite fine, and there is a consensus among the 4 parties. There's the regulator, the central bank, the ministry, and the stock exchange. So most likely we will be able to proceed on time and offer access to that market in either Q2 or Q3 of this year. And last but not least, we will continue with our non-listed businesses research project in order to be able to support the market with sufficient number of new and potentially successful listings in the next years. We will continue researching their balance sheets, contact them, ask them for meetings, and being on the front line of attracting non-listed business onto the exchange. This is pretty much all of it. Please, if you have further questions, because there is a time lag between us and you, please give us an indication that you will ask a question, and we'll wait a little while so you can take your time typing your questions in the screen.
Yes, thank you very much, Ivan. We're waiting for your questions, and there are still no questions.
We forgot to mention that the webcast will be shortly uploaded on our LinkedIn profile. There is a full recording of our today's meeting, and you can also ask your questions there.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for being with us. If you have any further questions, as Ivan said, you can ask your questions on our LinkedIn page. And that's all for today. Thanks again for being with us. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.